stage has also changed, right? So like it was public discourse in the beginning when we had Twitters and the Facebooks that were the main platforms, and now we're seeing a lot of these groups take the conversations in a more private places to where it isn't in the public eye, right? So it's a little tougher to combat that kind of information, and that's something relatively new that we're seeing that we weren't having to deal with in the past. In the past, it was about, well, how can we get ahead of misinformation and disinformation in these public type of forums? But now I think the majority of, or at least a big portion of this information is happening behind closed doors in private groups, maybe in WhatsApp groups or in Discord servers, where it isn't in the public eye. So that is a new challenge that I think will definitely have to be dealt with.
Welcome to the Money Matters podcast, where finance meets real life and we dive into the strategies that help you lead a financially savvy lifestyle. I'm Chris Hensley, and for nearly a decade, we've been the go-to resource for Houstonians and beyond looking to make sense of their dollars and cents. Today's episode is a special one where we explore the intersection of digital content creation, social impact, and digital misinformation, especially during the election year. Joining us are Jessica Bolaños and Nelson Vanegas. Nelson, I'm sorry, I'm probably slaughtering the last name there. You guys will tell me that in just a second here. The dynamic duo behind Goodspero. They've harnessed the power of storytelling to not only captivate the audience, but also to drive meaningful change into the digital world. As we navigate through the complexities of finance, digital misinformation, and the social economy, Jessica and Nelson will share insights from their journey, revealing how they're leveraging their platform to educate and inspire action in an era where truth and transparency are more valuable than ever. Both of you, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Chris.
And Jessica and Nelson, now you guys, this is one of the special episodes that I'm having where I'm having alumni guests on there. So you were on my to-do list already. So I was going to reach out to you and contact you, but I follow you guys on LinkedIn, and you posted something very recently about digital misinformation. That I read it. It was very good. If listeners who aren't following you, the stuff that you guys are putting on LinkedIn is really, really good stuff. And so that I thought that would be a good reason for us to revisit. But for listeners who don't know, I looked back at the original episode that you were on, and for some reason it was 10.5. I don't even know what the 0.5 was. That's how that, it was over 10 years ago. And for some reason I put like 10 and a half. So you guys were on one of the first few shows that we had where we were live on KPFT. You came into the studio. And so that's where, and I don't even know if you remember this, but you guys invited me to a crowdsourcing talk as well, where Angela Blanchard was there. And that was my first introduction to Angela, who I also follow on social media and is a fantastic writer. And so I wanted to thank you guys for making that introduction as well. But tell us a little bit about Goodspero and give us kind of an update. What's been going on for the last 10 years here?
It's been a long time. You actually caught us right when we were launching Goodspero. So we're just celebrating our 10-year anniversary actually this month. So
Nice.
It's good to be back. And so we've been using tech, whatever the latest tech is. Back then, like you said, it was crowdfunding. But we've always been into what's happening now, like social media wise, digital tools, video. Our superpower is video storytelling. But so we've always been into the latest stuff and not just using it, but teaching others, teaching communities, like the session you attended 10 years ago. I was at Platform Houston when that was around in Rice Village. We host things for the community, but then we also would go into organizations like Baker Ripley, where Angela Blanchard was, and teach their teams how to do the same things that we're doing on the executive level, or beginners, intermediate, advanced, wherever people are. We just kind of teach them how to use those tools. And we're still doing that today. 10 years ago, it was crowdfunding, but now it's all this AI stuff, which is why we've been writing about it.
I love it. I love it. No, it definitely caught my attention because that's a big topic that I've been, diving my feet into lately, AI. So I think everybody is interested in that. That's a fantastic topic. But yeah, it was crowdsourcing back then, and so the technology we've pivoted and we've changed throughout there. Maybe talk a little bit about that, some of the advancements in technology and how it's impacted the fight against what you call digital information, in that article that you published on LinkedIn.
Yeah, so things have changed a lot. So social media has always been here, even 10 years ago, but it wasn't being used so politically. And people weren't aware of it. We've always been influenced by what's in our feeds. But now we kind of understand more of like how the algorithms are affecting us. There's like echo chambers that we're starting to be aware of. And that's based on our own behavior. So, and some people may not know this still, but I think it's becoming more common knowledge. Whatever we do on, and it also depends on the platform. So most platforms were designed with their algorithms to where if they would assume that if our friends are liking something, then we'll like something, and so the platform might show us that. Then there's TikTok, which is their algorithm was different when it came out. It was more about what we are doing, and so if we are looking at something, then it would feed us more of that. So all their algorithms are different. But now we also have like this AI stuff. And now we have deep fakes, which are, really realistic video or audio content that some people can't really tell if it's real or if it's fake. And then we have people really micro targeting us uh, because of all the data that they're able to collect. And, even 10 years ago, you had the Cambridge Analytica scandal with the data, and they just kind of fed Facebook users, these little quizzes or whatever, and gathered a bunch of information without our consent and the information of our friends. And then they used that. And so Cambridge Analytica is a political consulting firm for those who don't know. And so they use that data to feed people ads tailored to like their fears, or maybe if they were undecided voters, they would target them specific ads to kind of push them into um, a certain spectrum of, or talking about immigration, if they're fearful about immigration, or even trying to get voters not to vote in the elections and stuff like that. So, but we also have tools like AI tools that are helping us combat this stuff, which I kind of talked about in my LinkedIn newsletter, working with Common Cause, which is they kind of they lead these efforts during elections and campaigns, working with the platforms, working with citizens like me. I was just a volunteer. And then they had us equipped with tools, which, like back then it was like a bot sentinel. So we would add this bot to our Chrome. It was a Chrome extension. So we went on Twitter and we could see whenever things are being posted how toxic
Yeah,
a
yeah.
user may be, and so we would flag information. That was a whole process and a training that we all went through just as citizens. And then they had even more trained people on their team, flagging that up, talking to the Facebooks and the different platforms. So we have tools, to combat this stuff too, fact checking organizations working with journalists and just users. And so, we're working on some good stuff too.
Yeah, and I
I
think
love it.
the stage has also changed, right? So like it was public discourse in the beginning when we had Twitters and the Facebooks that were the main platforms, and now we're seeing a lot of these groups take the conversations in a more private places to where it isn't in the public eye, right? So it's a little tougher to combat that kind of information, and that's something relatively new that we're seeing that we weren't having to deal with in the past. In the past, it was about, well, how can we get ahead of misinformation and disinformation in these public type of forums? But now I think the majority of, or at least a big portion of this information is happening behind closed doors in private groups, maybe in WhatsApp groups or in Discord servers, where it isn't in the public eye. So that is a new challenge that I think will definitely have to be dealt with.
Nelson, thank you for that. See, all of this is extremely important right now. We are entering an election cycle, so I always say, hold your watch up high because the room's filling up with BS. During an election cycle, we have some of the worst, viral headlines, and it can be bad. So some of the things that you mentioned, Jessica, you talked about the echo chamber, the algorithms, Cambridge Analytica. There was that Netflix documentary that hit that I think it kind of opened a bunch of people's eyes up to, we knew it was bad, but we didn't quite know it was that bad. And then that documentary came out, and so now we've got AI that's kind of sprinkled on top of it. And then Nelson, you mentioned that that things like that are happening in the background where people on discourse, it's these groups, these micro targeting that we mentioned there earlier. So all of this stuff is a different way to look at it. I am say less than optimistic about this election here with that rolling out, but you guys have given me some optimism here because the article you mentioned ways that we can kind of combat misinformation. Could you talk a little bit more about what somebody who wants to be aware of this type of stuff can do to kind of help themselves this year?
Well, the main thing I think is to get both yourself and your social circle into the habit of fact checking. Before we share things, like that's one of the big things. Let's go ahead and fact check some of these things that we're seeing online to make sure that it is at least based on some kind of fact and that there are some sources that you can go ahead and cite. And I think, Jess, there's some pretty cool tools that maybe you found or something else you want to add.
Yeah, there's some of the more known ones like Snopes.com. I don't know if anybody's heard that one, but that's a one where you can go and see, just kind of check. Well, if you go on the website, they kind of present a news article maybe that's gone viral, and then they'll tell you if it's real or if it's fake, maybe provide some sources. There's also factcheck.org. But if you Google any of these fact checking sites, you can pull up different ones. Most are nonpartisan. I'm sure there are also some that maybe not as credible, but that's another thing you have to kind of be aware of when you're using these sites. Then there's also like educational programming that I think we're seeing more of these days, digital literacy campaigns to teach people how to, look into the sources before you start sharing things, teaching people to be skeptical of the information that they're seeing if there's not verifiable evidence from what's being presented. There's one, so the University of Cincinnati Library has a pretty good digital literacy guide where they talk about how to evaluate online sources, how to spot fake news. They even talk about AI generated content and the echo chambers that we're talking about, conspiracy theories, all kinds of stuff that you can go and look into. So that's a pretty good guide. But yeah, I think I mentioned Common Cause and organizations like that. So I would definitely encourage people to volunteer for things like that. And, I learned a lot just working as a volunteer with these organizations. So definitely recommend looking into orgs like that, working to combat this stuff.
I love it. The tools that for people who haven't heard of these before, Snopes.com, factcheck.org, and we kind of smile because we're like, well, and then you have to fact check the fact checkers, right? Because you have to make sure that they're reliable sources as well. But you mentioned things like, educational programs rolling out, digital literacy. I know when I started, we're thinking 10 years back, there was the idea, the age group that I work with, 55 and up, that, they're not going to be digitally literate, right? And what we found is that during the pandemic, in the last, couple of years here, people who were not digitally literate were kind of forced to do it. Everything was being pointed online. And so, surprise, we've got more and more people that are online now. So, even generations generational. There's bigger buckets of generations there. You mentioned the University of Cincinnati, the digital library there. That's a great resource as well. So I want to pivot. We're about halfway through. We're about 15 minutes through. So I want to pivot and talk a little bit about more really just catching up with you guys. So I skipped the bio section altogether, but Nelson, we could do a whole show just on A-Leaf. When I was doing, when I was looking, I realized that you were born in A-Leaf. That I went to Hastings. I know for our international listeners that they may not know and may not mean anything, but Houstonians here we know. So Nelson, catch us up. In the last 10 years, tell us a little bit about maybe some of the success stories that you guys have had working with clients with what you do with Goodspero.
Yeah, so one of the big ones that we always talk about, our business, our agency was started out of the Wolf Center, and it's a program inside of the University of Houston. And it was a really formative type of program for us. I mean, I see it, and it's often described as like an elevator, right? If you go to Harvard, you're kind of expected to be up on that top floor already. And in the University of Houston, the neat thing is that the Wolf Center is like an elevator. So it brings people from different communities and gives them access to that top floor. It takes them up to the very top to be able to play in that arena. So coming out of that, we were like, how can we still be involved with the Wolf Center? How can we be a part of this really important thing where a lot of our youth can actually develop their strengths into something that's really fruitful, right? So we decided to see how we can help work with the Wolf Center to design a social media type of program where the students themselves can go ahead and manage the program itself, right? So we didn't want to make a program dependent on us. We wanted to see how can we build capacity, how can we go ahead and teach as much as we can while we also create some content. So like phase one of that year was, well, let's go ahead and test some waters out. Let's bring out and roll out the scaffolding of what this program might look like and get some students involved in phase two, year two. We started to take those steps back, started to let the students lead the effort a little bit more, let them kind of adjust as the program went on to see how this can continue without even us being involved. And then in the third year, we were almost hands off. We were pretty much hands off. We were only meeting with them a couple of times. And it's nice to see them now and their social media channels just blossom because of the way that these students really find ownership in that. And they have their own voice. So the best way that we've always felt stories could be told is by the communities themselves, right? So that to me was like a great example of how we tend to see our relationship with clients. We like to teach, build capacity as we're creating content for them. We're teaching them how to do that, and then that eventually will be able to plug out. And when they get up to the level of wanting more higher production value type things, that's when we step back in, right? So that to us was such a nice project to be involved with. And we've kind of done some similar things with other organizations over time.
I love it. I love it. And Jessica, I have this memory in the back of my head from our original interview, something about Beyonce and the largest collection or something. Can refresh my memory on that.
I don't know if I can still live up to that now, but yeah, I've always been a Beyonce fan. Really more about the business side of it and all of the social impact she does. That's not really talked about. Sometimes you'll hear about it, but she's kind of low key about it. So yeah, that was yeah, it was an article, I think. Well, it's been a few articles now about it, about my love for Beyonce and stuff. But yeah, it's a good memory.
I do remember that. I do remember that. And so let's see, we've got about 10 more minutes here. And tell us a little bit more about kind of the evolution of Goodspero, where you guys are at today, because you shared with us this success story with U of H. And I can tell you, I've talked to somebody recently. Again, this may not, for people outside of Houston, they may not know, but I've run into people from the Wolf program, the business school at U of H, and the difference. When I used to go out in these network meetings and shake hands, I could always tell when it was somebody who's graduated from U of H. They were just a different caliber, right? Compared to just everybody else there. But give us a little bit more into how Goodspero has evolved in terms of its mission and the services that it offers today.
Sure. Yeah. So our mission hasn't really changed much. Like I said earlier, it's really just the tech that's changed, and the vehicle we're using to deliver on our work. And so we still support organizations, we still support founders, and helping them solve their challenges, just using whatever the latest tech is. So, like I said, right now that's AI. So we're using a lot of AI to help solve problems, and we kind of so we talked about when we started, it was about creating content for crowdfunding campaigns, and we were teaching the corporate teams how to do the same, realizing if you want to know how to crowdfund, you're going to have to know how to do social media. And so that's why we kind of went to that space, teaching social media. And then we moved up to teach, the actual content creation and dug deeper into that. And so helping create content for brand awareness or capital campaigns or fundraising efforts or even internal and external communications, really whatever the need, you can pretty much solve it with digital and video and somehow. And so that's what we did, and we still do that. And so now we're loving AI, the AI world,
Yeah.
because I know some people are scared about it taking our jobs and everything, but I mean, we always tell people, like, well, this is just another tool that's making our lives easier. So I think you're right. If you're not using them, they could probably take your job, but maybe not AI. It's going to be the next person using AI. So we like to get into all these new tools, even in our own workflows, outside of teaching other people how to solve their problems. We're using it as well. So obviously, ChatGPT was like the big thing that everybody started using. If you're not using the paid version, I would highly recommend it. It's only like $20 or something a month, and now you're able to create like your own custom GPTs. Which, if you're not familiar with that space, it's so pretty much we created a Goodspero GPT, or when we work with clients, I'll create a custom GPT for that client, and you basically are able to feed it your own knowledge base. So you can upload your documents as an organization. You can upload it, what your goals are, whatever you want it to know, and then it's kind of like you can just toggle over from ChatGPT to your company GPT, and it makes life so much easier. And then you can now, they just opened up the marketplace for you to use other people's GPTs. So if, Chris, you made a GPT for, Money Matters or whatever you wanted to do, I could use your GPT and your knowledge base of all of this financial data that I don't know. And so I could essentially be asking you questions, and with your knowledge base. So it's pretty cool. So that's what we're still doing, teaching things like that, the latest stuff that people should be getting into and how to use it, guiding organizations on how to use it as well, which is something that people have always asked us when they see what we're doing. They ask us, hey, can you teach our teams how to do that, or can you help us, with whatever challenges they may have to do that stuff too. So yeah, we're still.
Shaking my head yes on all of this. Very, very good stuff here. 100%. So I hear embracing AI, and what you've done is you've kind of shared the evolution with me, where we started with the crowdfunding, then social media, the content creation, and the tools have changed. It's AI now, but you guys now have the experience after 10 years to help guide these organizations to actually learn about these new tools as they roll out. I love it. I love it. I can see it in the stuff that you're posting. I'm very steeped in Chat GPT as well. In fact, if you go out and look at podcast promoter GPT, that's me. So
Cool.
in both me and my assistant, 100% on board. I got certified through Vanderbilt in the analytics side of Chat GPT for the visualization. So yes, for companies, small companies, if you're here in Houston and you're looking for somebody who's got the experience now to guide you through as the technology changes, look at them. This is a great couple of who's been doing this for many years. There, we're bumping right towards the end of the show. Jessica Nelson, what have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners today?
Well, I mean, the future is always something that's top of mind for me. I'm always looking forward and seeing what the next thing is going to be, right? And we're talking with Jess about how content is being hyper personalized now, more so than in the past. So we did talk about how much information Facebook has and how it could even anticipate what we're thinking and what we're liking before we even know about it, right? But in the future, I think what's really changing is the location and the place and how they're going to be. We're going to be consuming information, right? Which, if we're consuming information, that means it's also an open door for organizations or companies to feed us information, right? So now we're seeing AR, MR, and XR kind of take a little more center stage. We're seeing the whole Apple Vision thing, and what does that mean, right? And then we have talks about Neuralink and being able to control things without having this interface of a thing of an issue, right? So it's both good and bad, right? I think for every advancement we have these challenges that pop up, but what these challenges also mean is there are opportunities for maybe our communities to be able to build businesses around solving these problems. So every time I do hear about a new advancement that's happening, I mean, yes, there are concerns that should be addressed, but I would love our communities to be at the forefront addressing those concerns before they balloon, and have us not be at the table helping guide these technologies and then make solutions for them.
I love it. I love it. Jessica, closing thoughts here as we wrap up?
Um, I would just say, hearing all the nice things you say about us, Chris, and our work, I just want to be clear that, you know, I'm not sure I like the word expert. I know you didn't use that word, but I just want to make it clear we're all still learning, and especially in this new AI world. But that's the fun part. I think that, if we hear a lot from people that they're kind of nervous or they don't know where this stuff is going, and they don't really know what to do. I mean, our favorite thing to do is just dabble in it, and so we encourage people to just try it out. Everybody's offering free trials of all these things, and so you don't even have to pay for it. Just you know dip your toes in the water. And if you would love some help, we always host stuff in the community, and other people are also doing the same. I see tons of even podcasters talking about it, and go on YouTube, you can learn more about it. But just I would just encourage everybody to like find those tools, find the digital literacy guides, and find all these things that are out there for us. So we're not just bystanders watching all this stuff happen. We should all be helping to create the tools as well, especially like kind of Nelson was touching on, um, diverse communities, because a lot of the stuff that's being created, a lot of these tools, they're kind of skewed just because of the people that are creating this stuff. And so we definitely need more women, we need more Latinos, we need more Black people, we need more like everybody to be involved in the creation and advancement of all this technology.
I love it. Jessica, Nelson, thank you so much. My 96-year-old grandmother is on Facebook. So if she can do it, you can get out of your comfort zone and download the free version of ChatGPT and just get your feet wet, start playing with it, right? Thank you so much for being on the show. Just a last minute thought for listeners who'd like to find out more about you. What is the best place for them to go?
You can
Well,
visit goodspero.com, right, Jess? Go ahead.
yep, that's right. I was also going to say we live on social media. Big surprise there. So you can follow us at Goodspero, which is Goodspero. And then you can follow me on all platforms at Fancy Capitalist, and Nelson at Nelson Vanegas.
Love it. I love it. Guys, thank you so much for being on the show. Have a great rest of the day there.
Thank you, Chris.